Okay, we're on. Thank you, Heather, for letting us know. So I am so happy to be here with you guys today and have the honor and the privilege of talking to one Mr. John Roedel, author and poet. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I before I ask him to come on screen. So just wonderful how, you know, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, I choose to call it God. And I am just so excited about how this interview came to be. So I was getting ready to do an interview a week Monday, and it was a podcast. And so we were on and we were recording, and, you know, technical difficulties, things were not working out. And I was there to give a message on, talk a little bit about my testimony and my past, and going through 2 failed marriages and kind of where I am now. And prior to that weekend, God had been really working on my heart and talking to me about going back and picking up pieces and taking it into my future. And he was talking to me about Ruth and Naomi, how they moved from Moab, where Ruth, that's where she was from, and she followed her mother-in-law Naomi into something new that she didn't know anything about, but God was doing something new for her. And he started talking to me about that. So anyways, come back to this interview. It didn't work out. So the interviewer says, well, let's try again tomorrow. And I had to tell her, you know what? I feel like I have a whole new message that I'm supposed to bring. I don't think that I'm going to go back and talk about these failed marriages. Yes, I know that's part of my testimony, but I feel like it's time for me to move on, and God is doing something new. And she said, okay, well, I'd love to hear what that message will be about. And so let's get on the call tomorrow and we'll try again. I woke up that next morning and here we are. My cousin sends me this post. And she's not on Facebook a lot. And she doesn't normally send posts. I could count on one hand how often she does that. And it's this beautiful piece that John wrote. And I just started weeping because it was just the goodness of God, how it was just such a confirmation. And this piece, when you hear it, it's about becoming something new and not trying to pick up the pieces and going back to what fell off of you. And so it was just such a huge blessing to me. And so that we still had technical difficulties. The interview never aired, but I knew that I was going to post this piece and I was going to do it intentionally. And so I did. And it just got so many shares. I don't know, I think we're up to 40 or 50 shares and likes and comments. And then I get this little comment from John talking about, you know, he just wanted to say thank you. And that's how we met. And next thing you know, I said, I need to talk to you live about this piece. So John, you know, what began as posting on Facebook about his ongoing faith crisis. It started in 2015, and it was kind of you had said it was kind of a way of making light of your doubts in the divine, and it turned into something that you weren't prepared for, which was God speaking, God writing back to you, basically. And so this is such an amazing story, and I just want you to be able to just bless us with that. So thank you, John, for being here, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, my goodness. I'm very, 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 very honored that you asked me to be here. This is an amazing experience. This piece, I had popped onto your Facebook page. Originally, when I started, popping onto people's Facebook page, I was doing it because at first the post wasn't being attributed to me, and that was mostly my fault. I didn't put my name on it. I had written it a while ago, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but I just simply popped on just to, thank you, because I noticed my name was on it, and I was just thanking you for posting it. And then you communicated back with me, and absolutely, I'm very honored to be here to talk about the piece and just talk about life.
That's awesome, John. Well, I guess, you know, because we probably have some new listeners and people that will, I know, be catching this on the replay. So I want to let you guys know, if after we read this and what things you hear, please do not hesitate in the comments to ask questions. And because we'd love to answer them. And so just feel free to ask questions, make comments. We would love that. So let's read the piece for everybody, John.
Okay.
So you know,
let me pull that. Let me pull the piece up really quick.
Sure.
And just to give a little.
You don't know it off heart?
No, I don't. And just to give a touch of backstory. So in 2015, so my vocation, and I really have a very limited skill set, according to all my guidance counselors that I've ever worked with in my life in college and high school. In fact, my college counselor once told me I might be the worst student he's ever met in his 30-year career, which might be true. So I don't remember the piece off top, but in 2015, I went to Facebook. My skill set is I teach improv, and I like performing improv comedy. And I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where that's not necessarily a hotbed of improv activity here. So I've been performing. We've had a great opportunity to perform here for a long time. And, you know, Cheyenne is not a very big town, but around town, I'm kind of known for, you know, performing on stage and making a fool of myself and my family on stage. And in 2015, so my reputation was kind of being a comedian, and that was my reputation in high school and college. I like to make people laugh. It's my favorite thing to do, is to make somebody laugh. But in 2015, 2014, I wasn't feeling particularly funny anymore. And at the time, I didn't really know what I was experiencing, but I was experiencing depression and just anxiety and doubt and just suffering. And I couldn't put a finger on it. And I knew I was unsettled, and I knew I was untethered to kind of the security I had before in my life. So I went, what any middle-aged man would do, I went onto Facebook and I started having fake conversations with God. And at the beginning, the conversations were about our favorite reality TV show, or, you know, the fact that I probably shouldn't wear skinny jeans, or whatever it was. They were supposed to be just kind of funny, poking fun at where I was in life. And I did that for about 3 or 4 months, and people followed along and thought they were pretty funny and cute. And then out of nowhere, I started posting about things in my life that were more real, and kind of talking about that suffering that I was going through that I couldn't quite define at the time. And God and I started talking about things like my mental health, or the challenges our family, my wife and I, we're raising. Our oldest son is living with autism, and just things like that were very real and weren't necessarily particularly funny anymore. And the more I started talking about my life with, you know, God, the more people started following along on these conversations. And the more I shared of myself and and was vulnerable, the more people started sharing their stories. And so I created a Facebook page called Hey God, Hey John. And that's where I wrote this piece originally in 2017, and it's really amazing now, 3 years later, that it has an impact, you know, on people. Because at the time when I wrote it, you know, maybe 100 people saw it and they liked it, and then everyone moved on with their life. And it wasn't until about 2 or 3 months ago, when I reposted that original piece, that it seemed like it fit more in this timeline that we're all experiencing right now. So that's a little bit of backstory. I don't necessarily believe that God is actually getting on Facebook and talking to me, although CBS did have a sitcom called about God getting on Facebook. I'm not really having that experience. I don't think that I'm a mystic or some sort of, you know, divine person who's contacting God. I'm not sure where these conversations come from, though. They come from somewhere inside of me. And yeah, so that's kind of a backstory to how this conversation with God came about. And so I think I am ready. I think I found it now. We can start right now. Are you ready?
I'm ready. So,
okay.
You know what? I want to preface this by saying, you know, I'm playing the part of God. And this is my interpretation of what that may sound like.
Sure, you bet. Hey, God,
Hello.
I'm falling apart. Can you put me back together?
I would rather not,
Why?
because you aren't a puzzle.
What about all the pieces of my life that are falling down onto the ground?
We'll let them stay there for a while. They fell off for a reason. Take some time and decide if you need any of those pieces back.
No, no, no. You don't understand. I'm breaking down.
No, you don't understand. You're breaking through. What you are feeling are just growing pains. You are shedding the things and people in your life that are holding you back. You aren't falling apart. You are falling into place. Relax, take some deep breaths, and allow those things you don't need anymore to fall off of you. Quit holding on to pieces that don't fit you anymore. Let them fall off. Let them go.
But once I start doing that, what will be left of me?
Only the very best pieces of you.
But I'm scared of changing.
I keep telling you, you aren't changing. You are becoming.
Becoming who?
Becoming who I created you to be. A person of light and love and charity and hope and courage and joy and mercy and grace and compassion. I made you for more than the shallow pieces you have decided to adorn yourself with. You that you cling to with such greed and fear. Let those pieces fall off of you. I love you. Don't change. Become, become who I made you to be. I'm going to keep telling you this until you remember it.
Well, there goes another piece.
Yep, let it be.
So wait, I'm not broken?
Of course not. But you are breaking like the dawn. It's a new day. Become. Oh, it makes me get emotional.
You did a wonderful job as God. That felt very natural.
It brings me back to waking up to this piece in my Facebook that morning.
Yeah.
And does it surprise you the reactions that you get to this piece?
Very much. Yeah, and to be honest, I don't remember I hope this doesn't ruin it for anybody. I don't remember writing it at the time. I remember the date and I look back to when I wrote it and I wasn't in a very good place back then. I was hurting, I was suffering. And so this piece came from that place in my life when on my timeline when I know I was not doing well. And this was me reaching out and asking whatever I could contact. Some could say, a lot of people who follow my posts have no belief system at all. They're atheists and they look at God as something else, as themselves or their ego or their consciousness. Some people very much look at, that I'm talking with God. I don't know. I don't really have an ego involved with this where I think, oh no, God would select me to talk to me with things like this. I just don't have that. But I remember feeling really, really scared during that time in my life and feeling I didn't know what my place was. And I look at all these other, 40-some-year-old guys who are driving around in sweet cars who, show up to cocktail parties and have amazing LinkedIn stories to tell about their resume. And here I was, a guy who sometimes gets on stage and makes people laugh, not really having a vocation and not really knowing what my purpose was and being really, really scared about what that means, certainly in 2017, even more so now when everyone seems so driven and ambitious and I just wasn't. And I remember being very, very scared. So when other people have an emotional reaction to it, I can completely empathize. I understand. I understand just the feelings involved with it because I lived through them.
Yeah. So then how do you feel like that's you know, I think you can kind of remember a little bit how you feel when you were writing it, or at the time, even though you cannot necessarily remember writing it. But
Right.
when you read the piece now today, how do you feel about it?
I feel like it was written it was written in a way that I don't know. I feel humbled that it has touched so many people, but I was writing it for where I was and how broken I felt in that moment and how nervous I was to be broken, because I would look at all these things in my life that weren't working for me. And I was like, why is this not working for me? And then looking at it now, the reason why those things weren't working for me is because they don't need to work for me. They shouldn't exist for me anymore. If they fell off of me, they don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And I look back and people seem like the lights are turning on for them quicker from reading the piece. I will tell you, I am still learning the lessons from the piece that I wrote. So I'm a little speechless when people really moves them and they feel inspired by it, and it helps them, because for me, it didn't work for me that quickly when I wrote it. I wrote the piece and then I kept living in that way of regret and guilt and hurt for things that I thought were broken in my life. And so I look at people who are reacting to it now, and it's a surreal experience. And it makes me wish that I would have learned the lessons that other people are getting from it earlier than I have, because I think it's only been in the last year that I've really embraced who I am. And that's a person who was, I'm not born to be perfect. I'm not born to compete. I'm not born, I don't feel like I fit into this modern world where everybody is racing and sharing perfect Instagram pictures and sculpting their life so beautifully. I am a mess of a human. I'm a hot mess. I leave my cell phone in the freezer more often than not. My wife will tell you she's probably destined for sainthood right away, because I am a mess of a person. And in this day and age, it's hard to be a mess of a person, because everyone sees you all the time. Everyone's filming each other.
Wow.
There's this kind of, and so I really struggled with just being who I am. And that's what I think this piece is about. It's about embracing who God, whatever you interpret that word to mean, created us to be. And these things that fall off of us are just, they're feathers that shed, or fur that comes off of they just don't belong to us anymore. But the core of who we are still remains. We are loved and we are a creation of the divine.
Wow. That is so amazing. Like, we talk about this, like in my business, a lot about this, the highlight reel that's on social media, that which is what you're seeing, the highlight reel. And but I am so drawn, and I know that there's so many of us out there who uh, and actually a lot of the stats, even with Facebook and Instagram, are showing that more people want authenticity, more people want rawness, and the more that I have found that I am raw and open, is the more people are saying, okay, I want to see what's going on in that girl's life, you know. And so this piece was like, I want to know what's going on in John's life. Like, I immediately started following you. I immediately started liking your page, looking at the other writings that you have, and you have, I think you have one or two books published right now.
I do. So I started the Hey God, Hey John project in 2015. And so I've written about 1,200 conversations between God and myself. It's a lot of conversations. Sometimes I would post 2 or 3 a day. My poor friends and family who were following me at first were very, very nice. And so I put the first couple years of those conversations into a book that I'm going to shamelessly plug right now,
Yes.
called Hey God, Hey John, What Happens When God Writes Back. And it was like from 2015 through 2018, the first kind of inclinations that something was happening. And it kind of shows the progression of how I started just treating it kind of as a silly little project to try to, make people laugh and poke fun at my own faith and mental health crisis. And then it kind of became much more serious and more meaningful. And you're exactly right. The more I showed what was behind the curtain about, I'm not altogether. I'm not, perfect. I have these problems. I have these issues. The more people started following along, and at first I had like 500 people on the page, and in the last 3 years, 4 years, it's grown up to we're almost to 20,000 followers on the Facebook page. And it's not because I'm a great writer. I mean, my ninth grade composition teacher will tell you I'm not a prolific writer who, knows how to use a semicolon. I am just a person who I made a decision to show up, and certainly I use social media in a way that Mark Zuckerberg probably didn't intend. I show up and I want to just show, for good or for bad, what the temperature of my heart is on that particular day. And not as a vanity project to say, oh, look how great John is. Maybe at first it was that, but now it's more to show you're not alone in feeling this way. If someone else feels disconnected, if someone else feels depressed, if someone else feels this tinge inside of them, they can't quite put their finger on it like I couldn't. I want to tell people, you're not on this road alone. Despite what 2020 will tell you, or what perfectly sculpted Instagram photos will tell you, everyone has got their own little journey they're on, and it's made me a much more empathetic person. In the last year, my writing is more. I think I've become an empath, and not
Wow.
just because I try not to write for just what's going on with John. I try to say, okay, when I'm sad, I know other people are sad, and I try to write in a way where it's not me in the story, it's all of us in our story. And I try to take me out of it. In the Hey God, Hey John project, I just use the word me. And I don't say John at the beginning, but after that, I want people to feel like it's about them and their story. When I write poetry, very rarely do I write personal stories about my own life. I write it in a perspective like, this is our experience when we're sad or when we're happy or things like that.
Yeah. And that absolutely shows through, and it absolutely resonates. And I think we're, in a time period, and maybe that is why this piece is basically going viral. It's why this piece is so important, because we're in a time right now that people are feeling some kind of way, and I don't know that they could put their finger on how they're feeling either.
Sure.
Really, I kind of want to talk about like how you feel about the popularity of this piece in this particular time, because this piece is now what, 5 years old?
I think I wrote this in 2017, so about 3 years old. But at the time, like I said, it really made a little bit of an impact with my readership, but not much. It wasn't anything that I had other pieces that seemed like it moved people more, or affected people more. And this one was in this February. It came up, in a memory that I had shared it 2 or 3 years ago. So I thought, okay, I will share it now. I wish I was smart enough. I wish I was some sort of guru who could tell you, oh, I knew this piece would really resonate with people now, and I intentionally reshared it. But maybe that shows, something more divine is at play. I'm happy to be a flute in the divine orchestra and just be played. Like, I don't mind that. So I just shared it again in February, and then again, a little bit of an impact on my timeline, but not much. And then about a month and a half later, I started getting contacted, mostly from people in Norway, which was really interesting, that this piece really meant. And I saw some new artwork attached to it, and it had been shared maybe 3,000 or 4,000 times through Norway and Sweden. I thought, oh, that's really amazing. I'd never had that kind of big experience like that. So I thought it was cool. And then about 2 weeks later, someone had 100,000 shares on it. And that was very humbling. And my name wasn't attached to it. So I had this crisis, and I'm the worst salesman of all time. I'm not a great advocate for myself, so I'm working on that. And so I started contacting people. It's like, okay, I know I didn't put my name on it originally, but I can prove that it's mine. And so I would be contacting people and just asking them to put it on. And it was amazing. I just saw it move through Europe. And it started in, Sweden and Norway and Finland, and then it moved its way into France and Spain. And then eventually, about in May, it crossed the Atlantic. It was in America, and it started getting shared widely there and here. And and I really do think that you're exactly right. In our time now, people are starting to feel those things breaking, the things that we all took for granted, or the things that we thought were important in our life, status, money, all these things that we had entrenched ourselves with, that the last 2 or 3 years, certainly the last 3 or 4 months, have shooken us awake a little bit and be like, what is important in our life? What are we going to remember? It's not going to be, what vacation you went on. It's going to be the people in your life, and it's going to be who you are, and were you authentic to who you were? You have one life, and are you pretending to be somebody else? And we all feel like we're on some sort of transition.
Yeah.
I really do think everybody feels like we're on a bus going somewhere and we don't know where it is.
Yeah.
And so I think it does resonate in that. And
yeah,
it's been amazing. In fact, a couple of days ago, I found out a Romanian actor who I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name because I would upset him, probably greatly ruining his birth name. But he's been on a couple shows in Romania, and he recorded a version of it, and it's been viewed like almost 200,000 times in 3 days. And I would be a terrible famous person. I'm not good at, it makes me a little uncomfortable, but I really don't think it's about me. I don't take like huge credit for this. Like, oh, look what a great piece I wrote. I think of it more of like, okay, I grew a wonderful garden, and there was a lot of rain and there was a lot of sunlight, and I'm not responsible for those things. All I did was plant the seed and, give it a little bit of love and care.
Yeah.
And it came from somewhere else. I think the growth of this piece really did come from somewhere else.
Yeah. And that to me is what makes you great. It's just that humbleness, that you're willing to be, you're willing to plant the seeds, and you're willing to be open with who you are and how you're feeling, if that means that one person is going to understand maybe their journey a little bit better.
Right.
And so before we wrap up, I really want to talk about this really impacted me, is like, I was reading this piece, and to tell you the truth, I wasn't honestly thinking, oh, I'm going to see a male's name as the author. And so the fact that you have been so open and authentic, and this is from your male perspective, I guess, what would you say to somebody who is maybe going through their own journey, and maybe it's mental health or whatever it is, but regardless of male or female,
sure,
what would you say to them? But I also want to know, what would you say to those men that are watching as well?
I would definitely say, so I do live, I mentioned this earlier. I'm one of like 8 people that live in Wyoming. And as a Wyomingite, we do kind of appreciate cowboy culture. And I'm the worst cowboy ever. Like, I don't do well on horses or in rodeos. But there is a culture here where men are kind of expected to kind of gut their pain, and to just like, you don't talk about it, you don't whine, you'll be considered a whiner, you'll be considered weak if you express the holes that you have in your heart. And I understand that. I totally understand that. I mean, I probably was not feeling well for many years before I started just writing about it openly on social media. So I totally understand where that comes from. In my opinion, there's no way you're ever going to really get help unless you ask for it. Mm. And you have to put yourself in that position, however that's going to be, whether that's with a friend on a phone call, or whether that's maybe with a spiritual leader, or certainly with a trained mental health professional. my way of doing it, my cry for help was I'm just going to go on Facebook and start writing about it. Whatever that is needs to be for somebody, you have to ask for help. And when you do that, help is an amazing word. Things just start clicking into place in your life. The more you ask for help, the more miracles you see, the more position you put yourself in to say, hey, I have this going on and I can't do it on my own. All of a sudden heroes come out of the woodwork. And that's been my experience. So for any certainly guy out there who's like, I can't come out and say that I have these issues, my advice is you have to tell somebody. You can't. I mean, in Wyoming, our suicide rates are pretty high.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get help unless people know that you're hurting. We're all very, very good at hiding our pain and hiding our scars and rolling our sleeves up so no one can see the marks. But you have to do that. And so to any 40, 30, 20, 15-year-old man, 80-year-old man, don't believe in the stigma that asking for help means weakness, because it doesn't. It means you're part of the human race. You're part of this experience that we're all on together, and we're no different from one another. We might have different experiences, but when somebody hurts my feelings, when I have a failure, I feel it just like somebody in New York City will have that. We're all connected to the same emotional wheel. And as far as anyone else, my advice to this is, and this is, I think, a theme through all of my writing unintentionally, because I'm not that smart to have some sort of grand architect or design for what I'm thinking, but it's this: all storms pass. And I remember when our oldest son, who's now 20 years old, and he's in college now, but at 2 years old, he was nonverbal. And the doctors told us he would never, ever be probably living on his own or functioning on his own. And he was, up until about 8 or 9 years old, he was very developmentally delayed, and he worked his butt off to get to where he is now. But at the time, I remember feeling this is the worst. Like I am not equipped to raise a child with severe special needs. I don't have it in me to do it. And every day felt harder than the next. And there was a wonderful lady who was a therapist for our son. She told me something that I think permeates all of my writing. And it's, the storm you're experiencing today will end, no matter what. All storms come to an end. A new storm might come right after it, and it might be worse, but this particular storm you're in right now has an expiration date. You don't. Our hope doesn't. Hope has no expiration date. So hope always outlasts whatever storm we're experiencing right now. And I think in my writing, that is what I try to say. And that's when I usually write from when I'm feeling that way, whether it's 2 a.m. or noon. Whenever I feel some sort of emotion washing over me, and it can be good emotions, positive emotions, I try to write from that emotional place because I know it's fleeting and it's going to pass. Right. And I want to remember how I feel in that moment. And so that's why I write from there. But when we're in these awful storms where we're like, okay, I can't make it to 5 o'clock. I can't make it to Friday. I can't make it another month feeling this way. These storms end at some point. And who we are, our soul, our hope, the way we were created, I believe, out of light and divinity, those are timeless, and we will outlast all of them.
Wow. That is an amazing way to wrap up. I was going to ask you if you want to leave us with any message, what would it be? And that was perfect.
I think that's what I would have said. So yeah. Perfect job setting that up.
Yeah. I don't even have to be here.
Yeah, right.
John, I really appreciate you being here and taking some time to talk to us and inspire us. I mean, the comments are going through, the inspiration, and Kara, been there, and hope was my anchor. Thankful for someone like yourself making so many people grow from within and find their little happy in their heart. So I just want to thank you because you are doing God's work and you don't even know it. It's just it's just amazing how you're allowing yourself to be used. I will definitely be dropping links to John's book his page, and hopefully we'll be able to share this video so people can watch it on the replay on your page as well, John. But I want to thank you so much for taking time out today, even just taking a little time out and commenting on my post from last week about your piece. And I'm so happy to have met you and your beautiful wife Jenny in this process. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
I will, and I'm really, really grateful and humble. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Have a great rest of your day.